Most of people's current problems are because of the medical system. Modern medicine actively tries to suppress any alternative healing modalities. Things got really bad in 1903 when the American Medical Association was formed. Any medical school that didn't base their model on giving people medications was shut down. Who does that benefit the most? Of course, pharmaceutical companies. Nutritional guidelines tell you, no, it's too much fat. Who writes the books? People who are selling you vegetable seed oils. A can of Coke is like 200 calories, which doesn't sound that crazy, but it's 15 tablespoons of sugar. Cholesterol is probably the biggest scam in the history of medicine, the biggest one. These medications are just incredibly toxic to the body. This is the entire 20th century fiat lie.
Archie.
Dr. Ammous, the Bitcoin doctor, and also famously Saifedean's brother as well. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Archie. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I've been seeing your commentary on my timeline for some time now. It took me a while to realize that you're actually Saifedean's brother, but I can definitely see it in the posting style. There is definitely a similarity there.
Yeah, I learned from the best. So
is he your older brother, younger brother?
He's older, yeah.
How did you get into this space? Because I have brothers. They're not really into Bitcoin. They understand it, but they're not really all that fascinated by it. They have a sort of passing interest. How did you fall down the rabbit hole, so to speak?
It's kind of difficult not to, if your brother is probably the best orange pillar in the world, If you spend enough time with him, he's just going to convince you. So, funnily enough, when he was writing the Bitcoin standard, we lived together. So I moved back to Lebanon to do my medical school, and we lived together for a few years. And that was the time when he wrote the Bitcoin standard. So it was, a lot of late night discussions about things and about money and about Austrian economics and about medicine. And yeah, so it wasn't very hard to convince me.
Did you have any kind of ideological affinity with Austrian economics or libertarianism or anything like that?
I mean, he also really got me into the Austrian economic stuff when I was younger, when he was starting to learn about it. So it always made sense to me, just because it makes a lot more sense than Keynesian economics. I took some economics classes in college, and it has zero real life application. So when he explained some Austrian economics to me, it made sense. And I understood the free market model. I understood how centralized money ruins things. And then we just added the Bitcoin layer on top of that.
Yeah, I wish I had that guidance earlier on as well. I sort of went through a miseducation through university as well, through finance. And it was such a misdirection that it baffled me when I was looking at the world and why things were the way they were, because, the way they explain to you how banking works, how economics works. And then I'm looking around thinking, well, why haven't we had a house price correction then? Why are asset prices going up? It just didn't make any sense to me, because there was not a single mention of monetary debasement in my entire business degree. I probably did 4 different economics subjects, not a single mention. I majored in finance, and even there was one subject about financial institutions and markets. Zero mention of any of that stuff, and it was just absolutely baffling to me. But fascinatingly, you have a similar sort of trajectory in your medical degree. You are a medical doctor, and you took the red pill, so to speak, with respect to your career. Now, tell us how something like that happens, because, I don't want to... The length of education you undertake is much longer than a mere business degree that I did. And I felt like I was indoctrinated after completing a business degree of 3 years. So, how does one come to the realization as an MD that, hey, something's not quite right here after, 8, 9, 10 years of study? Looking for a secure, trusted way to buy, sell, and hold Bitcoin? Gemini has been leading the way since 2014. Founded by the Winklevoss twins to be a security-first, fully regulated Bitcoin platform, with Gemini, your Bitcoin is protected with enterprise-grade security, backed by insurance and Type 2 certifications for both SOC 1 and SOC 2. Whether you're new to Bitcoin or a long-time hodler, Gemini gives you the tools to stack sats and build generational wealth. your way. From simple one-tap buys to advanced charts and trading features, it's all here. Buy, sell, and hold securely. That's Gemini. Gemini. Bitcoin with confidence. The DeBiFi Prepaid Visa card is here. Just borrow against your Bitcoin, load US dollars onto your card, and pay instantly. No banks, no selling your Bitcoin. Just secure, short-term loans backed by your Bitcoin. Ready to spend with your DeBiFi Prepaid Visa card. It's also non-custodial. Your keys, your Bitcoin, always. Get cash, keep your Bitcoin upside, and spend it anywhere. That's DeBiFi. Bitcoin-backed loans, now in your wallet.
Yeah, I mean, I was lucky that my brother, always taught me to question things. And when I was in medical school, so this was when I was a first-year medical student. So I did an undergraduate degree. I studied very hard for 4 years to get into medical school. And then as a first-year medical student, there are certain rotations where they get you like mock patients who actually have a condition so that you see how it looks in real life. And I would talk to these patients and they tell me, oh, so they have something called rheumatoid arthritis, which is an inflammatory joint condition. And I would talk to them, so how long you've had it? And they tell me, oh, 10 years. And so I tell them, so you've been on medications for 10 years. You've been seeing doctors for 10 years. And they're like, yes. And I'm like, okay, so over those 10 years, how much improvement have you had in your condition? Because I can still see that your joints are deformed and they look painful. And they tell me, oh, we've had maybe a 20, 30% improvement. And that was absolutely shocking for me. All my life I've been studying to try and make it to medical school, to become a doctor. And all of this in order to, at the end, help people improve by 20%. What kind of scam is this, And it was really a very tough moment in my career, because I really thought I was gonna quit at that point, because why am I doing this if I'm not really improving anyone? And it got me just questioning things, and it so happened that at the same time I was making changes in my diet. So my brother had introduced me to the paleo diet at that time, and I just fixed my diet and I felt so much better. And I started to think, well, so if these dietary changes made me feel so much better, what would they do to all these miserable patients that I see in the hospital? And then I understood that there are actually natural ways to heal people, but that's not what I'm being taught in medical school.
That's some mind-blowing stuff that you dedicate yourself for how many years? I don't know, like 8, 9, 10 years, depending on your course of study in medicine. And then you go out there into the real world and you encounter an example like this. It reminds me of the story of Nassim Taleb. He says, I studied all this time in finance and then I went onto the trading floor and my mind was blown. My world was shattered because I'd built up this idea of what finance was like and all these ideas of how to go in there and operate in the markets. And these people were just using tried heuristics, basically zero theory, just heuristics, rules of thumb about how to price risk and assets and the like. And he just felt like he'd wasted his time. Did you feel that way?
To be honest, I mean, I don't think it was a waste of time, because you have to, most of people's current problems are because of the medical system. Most of people's current problems are because of the medications they're getting, the injections they're getting, all these things. And I had to kind of master that in order to actually be able to help people the way I'm doing right now. You can't, the complexity of these medications and how they affect the body and how you see the degeneration they cause and all these things. I'm glad I took all those years to try and figure that out. However, it was really, really, really frustrating to spend so many years of not actually healing people, to seeing people come to your clinic and leave feeling the same way. And you see them a few months later and there's not really that much improvement. That was really frustrating.
How do you unravel the framework that you've been taught, the medical framework that you've been taught? You've taken a red pill, you have a realization that something is wrong. What are the steps and processes from thereafter that make you understand that actually there is a different way, and the framework we're applying in traditional medicine is not quite appropriate, or perhaps even a misdirection, the word that I used about my education?
Yeah, it was my formula was to follow anyone that was labeled a quack by the current medical system, because they probably knows what they're talking about. And that was basically my formula. And I just started, Googling people, Facebook groups, Twitter, following people that were speaking out against the system and had alternative views about looking at the body. And I just started to understand their perspective on things. So I was studying that as I was going through the traditional medical education. And it was always good to, compare and contrast notes about what fiat medicine is telling you and what these doctors are telling me. And it's not an easy job, because modern medicine actively tries to suppress any alternative healing modalities. So, the other story is actively being hidden away from you. And so it's definitely not easy.
Can you elaborate on that? Because that's a key part of this discussion, I think. How does modern medicine go about obfuscating real solutions?
Yeah, so I will talk about the US, because sort of this is how the US was considered the leader in medicine in the 20th century. And so nearly all countries started to try and imitate the American model. And so things got really bad in 1903 when the American Medical Association was formed. And then in 1910, the American Medical Association published this report called the Flexner Report. The purpose of this report was to standardize medical education in the US. What they were saying is that there's too many schools that are, graduating quacks. They don't have proper standards. They're not teaching the scientific method, all these things. And therefore, we need to go in and standardize and make sure that all medical schools are at the same level. So they actually went in and did that, and they shut down more than 60% of US medical schools. Okay? So, the cover story is that we're doing this so that only scientific medical schools exist. But what they actually did was any medical schools that was teaching non-pharmacologic based medicine was shut down. So any medical school that didn't base their model on giving people medications was shut down. Because at that point in the early 20th century, our concept of a doctor isn't the way it is right now. Naturopaths were considered doctors. Osteopaths were doctors. Chiropractors were doctors. Herbal treatments were considered, there were doctors for herbal treatments. There were homeopaths. So all of these alternative ways of looking at the body had their own medical schools, and all of these were shut down, just so only pharmaceutical medicine is taught. And who does that benefit the most? Of course, pharmaceutical companies. And Abraham Flexner had very strong tie to pharmaceutical companies, and he's the one who wrote this Flexner report.
It's interesting to me that you mentioned both chiropractors and homeopathy, because when I have a look at the general media, I think those two are the ones. There's such a strong consensus about the lack of credibility for both of those professions. I see a lot of people disparage those two professions as being not legitimate medical practices. Why do you think that is?
That's a known propaganda campaign from the American Medical Association, so that these healing modalities that actually historically were helping people and actually have a longer history of success than pharmaceutical medicine and what we call allopathic medicine, they're actually telling us that these modalities don't work. That's not how a proper, free market a free market of ideas works. If you think that they are quacks, if you think that pharmaceutical medicine is better than what they are prescribing for people, then just let consumers decide that. Let patients decide that. They have the right to go to a regular doctor, an allopathic doctor, and they have the right to go to a homeopath and see which one helps them most. Why do you have to shut down the homeopath's medical school? Why do you have to put media campaigns against them? Why is it illegal for them to practice?
Is it, perhaps if I can play the devil's advocate, it could be, well, that there's a huge grey area for people to take advantage of someone with an ailment in a desperate situation looking for a cure. And as such, perhaps there is a need, just like we have certain regulations in other industries, like, in the building industry, we have regulations to protect people from shoddy craftsmen and the like, shoddy builders. And so perhaps, isn't there a need also to have some type of regulatory body, some kind of standard-based organization to help mitigate people who are charlatans?
I agree, but this organization does not have to be government run. It does not have to be government funded, and it does not. The moment that you centralize power too much, the problem with that is that this authority is very susceptible to corruption, and this is exactly what we see right now. Is that pharmaceutical companies just target this society, the medical societies that are government backed, and they get to dictate all the rules of how physicians practice.
We being Bitcoiners, where we understand the perils of centralization. So how can we have a more decentralized way in medicine to be able to monitor and maintain standards and actually, filter out the scammers and the charlatans and snake oil salesmen? How can we do that in a decentralized way without opening up so much room for those types of scammers in medicine?
So, an important thing to point out is nobody has a motivation as a healer to try and poison people. If you poison people, the world is going to go out. We now live in an internet age. Soon enough, everyone will know that this guy is poisoning people, his medication doesn't work, etc. So there's always a reputation thing. And, historically, how treatments that worked, how word was spread out was, this doctor starts using it on his wife. His wife tells her friends tell their cousins, and eventually this doctor develops a reputation that he's got something that's working for people. So this is how decentralized things work, is word of mouth, and your proof of work is what people's word out.
I agree with that. For things that work, they do stand the test of time. But scammers can often get a huge runway before they're caught out. And the amount of damage they can do in the interim can be really quite significant. From bad health to financial fraud as a result of selling things that don't really work or even do harm. So that's what I'd be concerned of whenever I consider anything from a deregulation point of view, a decentralization point of view. My concern always comes to, but scammers can have a long time before they're actually caught out through reputation in a free market. Mm-hmm. We've seen that in crypto, for example. Mm-hmm. There are scammers who are even celebrated in the marketplace. Long after it's well known that they are scammers. So how do we mitigate that? Because I'm not sure there is a mechanism or a structure to be able to do that. By the same token, I really like the idea of an open marketplace for lots of ideas and people being discerning and exercising their own judgment in finding what works. So I'm very confused about the whole space about, I don't like this whole centralized gatekeeping by, government-funded organizations. And I do believe that's gatekeeping in exactly the way you've described. But I don't know what the answer is.
Some suggestions that I have is, so, for example, who regulates cardiac medications? Who regulates what patients with heart issues, what their physicians are telling them? Something called the American College of Cardiology. Okay, we could have a collection of physicians that call themselves the American College of Cardiology, but the issue becomes when the government dictates that this is the only college that you listen to. What if another group of cardiologists got along and they wanted to have their own alternative way of recommending medications and examining medications. This is not allowed in the current model. So there are safeguards out there, but these safeguards are captured. So I'm not saying we shouldn't have safeguards. I'm saying, why is the government intervening in that? And there will always be people out there, experts, that their entire motivation will be to help people, sort through these things. And people will collect together, experts will collect together, and they'll be able to give expert opinion about things. And this is it's becoming sort of what a lot of like online health influencers are doing, where they're telling you, oh no, don't listen to the most recent online scam about this supplement or this vitamin. If you trust these people, I mean, they can go a long way in telling you what is actually works and what doesn't work.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like that example that you've given about, online influencers. And in some ways, part of my experience when I was a child is I spent about, I think, 8 or 10 months on a long family holiday in Turkey, where I got to live amongst, my cousins, my aunties, uncles, everything. Because in Australia, I'm Australian, we don't really have all that much extended family, and we live quite an isolated life. And one of the fascinating observations I made is how the women in our families, how they actually prepare the nutrition for everybody to eat, and how they compare recipes, and how someone in their family doesn't like it like this. He gets a bit of a reaction when she makes this recipe in that way. And so I just imagine these iterations over thousands of years of culture, of humanity, that have perfected the cuisine in every single geography without any need for centralized control, and it's just understood. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like that wisdom of crowds, the wisdom of culture, is starting to reemerge in Western society through the influences on decentralized social media. How do you view that? Because I think nutrition, for me, has been the first stop to maintaining good health. So how do you view that sort of disparity or decentralized information emerging now?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty incredible, and it's giving people so many options and so many things to learn from. And the entire in my medical education, anything like any folk wisdom, if a mom comes to me or a grandma comes to me and tells me this is what I'm doing for this baby, the immediate reaction I was taught in medical school is, this is quackery, this is bullshit, stay away from it, tell them that it doesn't work, just listen to what's in the books. And what's in the books is what's the propaganda that's written by pharmaceutical industry. The same applies for nutritional guidelines. So that's what dietitians are taught. If grandmas are saying that bone broth is good for you, bone broth is the ultimate health food, nutritional guidelines tell you, no, it's too much fat, etc. Just listen to what the books say. Who writes the books? People who are selling you vegetable seed oils. And this is the entire 20th century fiat lie. And thankfully, with the internet, we are starting to break out of it. And people are reconnecting to all this ancient wisdom that we've had for thousands of years.
I wonder sometimes whether or not the language of science in nutrition science and the language of culture are very different, and we're unable to reconcile what is meant when, your grandmother or your mother says, don't eat too much meat every single day, maybe break it up with a little bit of soup, otherwise your stomach will get hard. Now, that's what my grandmother said to me. Now, a scientist will say there is no evidence your stomach is going to get hard, right? We know that doesn't happen. But now we understand the whole idea of biodiversity and, your gut enzymes and all that sort of stuff. And it's like, okay, well, my grandmother wasn't literally correct. But heuristically, from a health point of view, the idea of variability in your diet has some merit, doesn't it?
Yeah, 100%. And, this ancient wisdom, a lot of it is, they didn't understand the body the way we did. They understand how things make you feel. They were a lot more connected to the sensations in their body. What modern science and modern medicine wants to do is just break things down into a very materialistic way of looking at things. unless we can see it on a CT scan that the abdomen or the stomach is broken, then it doesn't exist. But that's not how it works. There's thousands of people out there with completely healthy looking stomachs, but they have very bad digestive issues. And, as science is improving now, we're looking into the microbiome, we're looking into digestive enzymes, we're looking into energetic medicine, all these things, and we're just catching up with all that wisdom. And so it's really criminal from science to just throw out everything that doesn't fit their model, because their model is just insufficient.
That's one of the things that I've wondered, is that, whenever I look at any kind of native culture, all of them have perfected their cuisines, their nutritional requirements, all of them through iterations over hundreds, if not thousands of years, through the practice of women sharing recipes and the reactions of their families to things, and they iterate with one another and, and experiment as well, but science can't tell you what to eat. Like, try to get scientists agreeing on what an ideal diet is for a single person. It seems to be like an impossibility to get that consensus.
Yeah, I mean, if the goal of nutritional science was to actually make people healthy, then they would have back engineered things. They would have looked at cultures that ate well and looked healthy and looked at what they saw and studied that. But instead, they wanted to develop the ideal diet based on health models and calories and micronutrients, etc., because they're trying to eventually just sell you processed food. The goal is not making you healthy.
How does one start to understand how they should eat then? I don't know if you're a proponent of the carnivore diet. I know your brother is a very strong proponent of carnivore diet. I love meat, but I cannot bring myself to stray from, all the recipes that my ancestors have created, like, hummus and salads and, stuffed aubergines and all this sort of stuff that is very popular in our parts of the world. So, like, how does one start to understand how they should eat then? Because, like I said earlier, I think diet was the first place I looked at to maintain my health. But how can someone understand what they should be eating? What sort of framework is there for someone to understand that, or how do they get started in that regard?
As I said, I think the ideal model is to back engineer it and look at actual societies that are healthy. And one of the most influential people that looked in this is a dentist by the name of Weston Price. So Weston Price was a dentist in the early 1900s who, at that point, there was a lot of interest in vegan and vegetarian diets, that the ideal human diet is vegan and vegetarian. And this is the healthiest diet and the answer to all our problems. So he was a dentist, and, back then air travel wasn't as easy as now, but he went all over the world looking at cultures that haven't been touched by industrialization. So they don't have white sugar yet, they don't have processed bread, all these things. And he wanted to see what did they eat. Going there, his purpose was to actually prove that, a vegan and vegetarian diet is the healthiest diet. And that's what, that's what historically people ate. But what he actually discovered, that all these societies all over the world, what they shared in common is that the staple of the diet was animal meat and fat, with no exception. Depending on what animals grow there, whether it's fish, whether it's lamb, whether it's cows, whether it's chicken, whatever it was, that was always the staple of the diet, alongside other things that people ate. So he always saw that pattern and saw that people really appreciated animal fat as well. And so once you understand that, you understand that that's the basis of a healthy diet. And, traditional Turkish cuisine, they know that the staple of the diet is whatever meat there is, whether it's the lamb, and the stuff on the side is to kind of just fill you up and good for to stimulate your appetite and stuff. So that is the staple of the diet, in my opinion. The reason there's so much confusion about diet these days is because we live in an environment where you can get all sorts of crops all year round from all over the world. So I live in Boston. I can get pineapples in December if I want, imported from wherever. And our ancestors didn't have that problem. They never had access to pineapples in December. So the ideal thing for your metabolism is to eat the things that grow in your environment at that time of the year. And why is that important? Because if I live in a cold environment, I don't do very well processing simple sugars in the winter. Just the way our digestive abilities and our metabolisms work is they rely on signals from the sun in order to digest things properly. And so it's pretty incredible that you digest the things well that grow in your environment at that same time, that are getting the same light signal, the same sun signal. So that's the basis of the ideal diet, is eating from your own environment. Avoid anything processed made in a factory, because it's going to contain seed oils, it's going to contain additives that are bad for you, and it's derived. The processing deprives it of all the good nutrients that natural foods grown in their own environment have.
Processing can be a really broad general term. How do we define what processing is? Like, I can tell processed bread from something that I take, I can buy from a proper baker, for example, right? And there's a clear difference in that. But how do I define what processed food is for everything else? Like, is peanut butter something that I shouldn't be consuming, for example?
It depends on the ingredients in the peanut butter, but in general, I think anything made in a factory you should limit as much as possible, in my opinion. Eat as if how our ancestors ate, from nature.
So you're talking raw ingredients and cook them from scratch. That's essentially a
ideally, yes.
Yeah.
If you can find peanut butter that's not again, also, like, processed depends on the ingredients and things, Peanut butter is, and a lot of times, is going to include seed oils and include added sugar. So you have to eliminate those. Fundamentally, what people need to understand is, in nature, seeds were basically unedible because plants produce seeds not for you to eat, but for them to grow their progeny. So the fruit you can eat, but the seed, the plant wants you to poop that seed somewhere else. So the only way we started being able to eat seeds is by heavy processing of these seeds. And that's what industrialization enabled us to do in the 20th century. And what you end up doing by, in order to get out the fats that are in the seed, you have to heat it to very high temperatures, which denature the oils that are in these seeds. And you're also exposing it to a lot of chemicals to try and get these oils out from the seed. And so that's why seed oils are so bad. You're getting a combination of heat unstable fats and a lot of chemicals that were used to kind of extract them. And seed oils directly affect the membranes of your mitochondria, the energy generating parts of your cell, and you're less efficient at generating energy when you have seed oils in your mitochondrial membranes.
So it's actually more profound than merely just calories. Controlling for calories is like other people have said, and then just merely measuring inflammation, or because it's actually more profound about the way that your cells generate energy and how they function at a fundamental level.
Seed oils are, say, less calories than like butter if you need just to fry your eggs, but they're a lot more damaging than butter.
Are you familiar with a guy called Lane Norton? He's I think he's a nutrition scientist, and he does a bunch of stuff in exercise as well. Like he's a heavy lifter as well. I don't want to misrepresent him because he's quite a fiery character online. But my understanding is that I think he pushes back against a lot of the criticism when it comes to seed oils, when it comes to high fructose corn syrup, and he said primarily it's the amount of calories, it's the overfeeding that's the primary cause of the inflammation. And you can get that from overeating, non-processed stuff as well, and you can get that from overeating raw sugar just as much as high fructose corn syrup, for example. And I'm not sure what to make of that, to be honest, because I think in one regard, I find personally, I don't know if the science backs it up, but I find processed food is designed, it makes me want to eat so much more. So doesn't that basically dispel what he's trying to say? Is that, okay, well, if you control for calories, they're all the same, or there's not that much difference. Whereas I find actually I can't control for calories, because just the fact that it's processed, I find that it makes me want to eat more of it.
Yeah.
I mean, have I got that right? Like processed food, is it harder to control your calories when you're eating processed food? Because I find it incredibly difficult when it comes to that.
Yeah, I mean, a very good book to kind of understand this is a book called Good Calories, Bad Calories by Gary Taubes.
I'm familiar with him, yeah.
Where he actually analyzes what this process is. And what you need to understand is a calorie is something that in a lab you burn and you see how much energy comes out by burning that food. It's completely different from what happens in your body. And why is that? Is because how a food affects your metabolism in the body depends on the signals that it gives to your body. So for example, if you're in the summer, the purpose for your body when you eat sugar is to store as much fat as possible in the summer, so that you have that fat for when the winter comes and there's not that much fruit out. And so sugar in general makes you more hungry and makes you put on fat. Versus in the other extreme, if you eat animal protein and fat, which is what ancestors mostly ate in the winter, because there's not that much agriculture growing. You just get animals and slaughter them and eat them. It causes you to get full more easily, and your body tends to store less of these calories. So 1,000 calories of a ribeye is very different than 1,000 calories from a peanut butter,
Yeah, peanut butter or fruit or any kind of sugars, of easily digestible carbohydrates. You're going to get a different signaling to your body. I definitely feel that. Even if I eat a combination, like what might be considered a typical meal, where it's, as you've described, some kind of meat, some kind of salad, and then I top it off with some kind of sweet or fruit, I feel like repeating the process all over again. I feel like having another dinner, and I've got to stop myself because, I obviously can't do that. It's not healthy for me, and it makes it difficult to manage my weight as a result of that.
All of medicine, everything I was taught in medical school is that it's only calories that matter. And again, just so, they can push seed oils and they can push processed foods. And, a can of Coke is like 200 calories, which doesn't sound that crazy, But when you think about it, when you know that it's 15 tablespoons of sugar, kind of, it's a different way of thinking about things. But the only way to get people to eat this sugar bomb is just to tell them that it's only calories that matter.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Because then you're not equating. You're not actually focusing on the ingredients.
Exactly.
And the difference in the type of nutrition you're getting from that. And crucially, we keep coming back to it. It's the signaling to your body. So when they do these nutrition studies and they control for calories, they're actually controlling your behavior as a result of controlling for calories, right? So you don't have the option to go and get more because the study is telling you what you can eat and it's giving you only what you can eat. Whereas when we're in real life, we've got the option of, acting on our impulse as a result of what we've already eaten. So if you've had a Coke, that may make you reach out for a chocolate bar. Whereas if you've had 200 calories equivalent of, I don't know, chicken, that's not necessarily going to make you reach out for a chocolate bar afterwards, and keep eating in that way. It's going to make you want to behave in a very different way.
It's very hard to overeat animal meat and protein because there's so much digestive power for it, and it doesn't send all these insulin signals that you need to eat more to save up for the cold winter that's coming up.
I came across quite a number of people saying, actually, your insulin response to let's say, to eating a steak can often be the equivalent to having pasta. But there is a difference in how you digest both meals, right? In terms of what the insulin can actually get your body to do with it.
Yeah, I mean, the spike of insulin, how quick it is, that makes a huge difference. It's a lot more gradual when you eat an animal meat or protein, or when you eat some less processed carbohydrates. So, for example, potatoes, sweet potatoes, etc., versus eating heavily processed carbohydrates or table sugar.
I wonder if my understanding is mistaken, or please correct me if I'm wrong, but the insulin is essentially what takes your calories and stores it, right?
Correct.
That's what it signals the body to do. And I just wonder if the difference between eating an equivalent number of calories in steak or versus pasta is that your body's not going to digest the steak fast enough for the insulin signaling to then store your calories in your fat cells, whereas the pasta will be available very, very soon.
Correct. 100%.
Yeah.
And
okay.
What happens a lot if you eat a lot of processed carbohydrates that break down very easily into quick sugars in the body is that so you get a very high spike of insulin. And so in nature, carbohydrates don't give you like an immediate spike in blood sugar. It's more gradual, because even if with fruit comes with a matrix that it takes some time for, say, the oranges that you're eating, it takes some time for you to get the sugar out of the covering that's in it, okay? If you get that instant spike in sugar from eating an Oreo gives you a very high spike of sugar, and versus your insulin levels want to go out more gradually. So the high sugar rush gives you a very high insulin push, and that drops your sugars too fast.
So you get a crash, you get a spike and a crash.
Exactly. And as a counter-regulatory, you need to eat more carbohydrates to get your sugar back up.
So if you have carbs that are slower digesting, because I know some people completely dismiss carbs. Like, for example, what I do, most of the day I don't really eat carbohydrates, but about an hour before my workout, I will have what I would call relatively fast digesting carbohydrates. Is that a good way to use carbohydrates? Because I'm not someone who wants to rule out carbohydrates altogether. I find that's probably a bit too drastic for me. I still feel like I need carbohydrates for my lifestyle.
The pre-workout thing is a good idea. My general philosophy is if you choose the right source of carbohydrate, you can have carbohydrates. I don't think this is controversial in the carnivore community. I don't think the ideal human diet, if you live in an environment, of course, where there are fruits growing around you, I don't think it's sustainable for your metabolism to just run on protein and fat forever, because that's just how your digestion works. Your enzymes kind of expect a certain number of carbohydrates, and that's how metabolism works. In my opinion, if you eat something that grows in nature, your body is able to process it. So I think, I don't know if you want to target Nutella before a workout, or just target just eating the right carbohydrates that are more natural. That's what I do. So.
The reason why I don't want to cut it out is I do think insulin signaling is really useful. I mean, I don't know the science behind it, but I'm like, if we've evolved to have insulin signaling, because insulin is a growth factor, it's not necessarily all bad, is it? So like every now and then to have like a burst of insulin, a spike of insulin or such, once or twice a week, doesn't that have some kind of halo effect with respect to your body? Doesn't it have benefits from a sex hormone production point of view as well?
If you're constantly with zero carbohydrates and you have no insulin, that's a signal for your body that you're constantly in winter. And winter is not a time to reproduce, is not a time to build muscle. Winter is just survival mode, okay? And what happens in winter? You just have very high cortisol, high stress levels in order to just make you go out and hunt. So that feels good. That's why the carnivore diet feels good, because you have high cortisol. Long-term impact of that, I don't think are great, okay? What Insulin is not the enemy. Insulin spikes after meals is not the enemy. What is the problem with insulin is chronically elevated levels of insulin. And this goes into, once you start to understand quantum biology, that it's not just the diet. There's other things that cause your insulin to be high and your sugar to be high that's not related to food. So believe it or not, if you are under artificial blue light all the time, that causes your cortisol to go up, causes your blood sugars to go up, and your insulin to be up. And that can cause insulin resistance and diabetes, even if you're not eating that much carbohydrates. And having chronically elevated levels of insulin is more dangerous than these spikes that you get after meals, which are more natural.
Hang on. Wait. I got to make sure I understood this. That's incredible. So if you're just eating regularly, so you're not over-consuming, but you're chronically exposed to blue light, commonly found in like LEDs, right? Mm-hmm. Which is fairly standard for an office environment, yeah? And even most houses these days have LED downlights as well. Many houses under the guise of sort of modern decor. That in and of itself will elevate your cortisol level, which will create elevated levels of insulin. Is that right?
Correct.
And cause insulin insensitivity.
Correct. And that's a lot more dangerous than the spikes that you get after meals, because the spikes after meals are natural, but you're not supposed to be running in a high glucose environment all day.
So not only are you in a high stress state, but you're also developing insulin insensitivity as well, which means that, when you're consuming any kind of carbohydrates, your body's not responding in a very natural way. You're not getting proper signaling. As a result, you're getting cravings to then eat even more carbohydrates.
100%. And you can fix that by getting rid of all carbohydrates in the diet, but you're not addressing the root cause of why your metabolism is wrecked. And so that's why the obsession with diet, I get it. Diet is very important, but it's not the only thing. And I think a lot of Twitter, the health space in Twitter, that's something that they need to work on. It's just forever a discussion of calories and insulin and carbs and protein and fat and carnivore and keto, but there's a little bit more nuance to it. And it's important to also raise awareness about how important light and quantum biology and mitochondrial health is.
Dr. Ammous, we've spoken about seed oils, and one of the things that I guess one way that seed oils were popularized was through the cholesterol fear. I definitely had that. So in many ways I was miseducated and misdirected in my youth, and even up until my, early 20s and mid 20s when I graduated from what I considered was going to elevate me with my business degree. It was actually misdirecting me, and it would be a problem that I would struggle to solve until I found Bitcoin. But cholesterol has been one of those things that I think I was also misdirected. Should people be concerned with their cholesterol levels?
Yeah. So cholesterol is probably the biggest scam in the history of medicine. The biggest one. It's probably the one that I get the most questions about. And the reason why the scam was just so big, because it was propagated by two industries. One, the vegetable seed oil industry, and two, the statin or cholesterol medication selling in the pharmaceutical industry. So where did this entire scam start? In the 1950s, there was an alarming increase of heart attacks in the US, of heart disease. And so all the brightest researchers went out there to try and figure out what the cause of this is. One researcher by the name of Ansel Keys did a study that he called the 7-country study, where he looked at the rates of heart disease and countries' saturated fat intake, animal fat intake, and saw that as there's more animal fat intake, there was a higher risk of heart disease. This study just shattered the headlines. It was on Time magazine. It was the biggest revelation of that time. And all of a sudden, Everyone was telling people, don't eat butter, don't eat animal fat, because they raise your cholesterol and cause you to get heart disease. Who was propagating that message? Vegetable seed oil manufacturers, because they could make such a huge margin from selling you toxic vegetable seed oils. There's a lot more money to make something that lasts on the shelf for 5 years versus butter that can last only a few weeks in a fridge, So there was a huge industry that drove that message. Then, before, if you analyzed Ansel Keys' data, you actually saw that he omitted a lot of countries that don't fit that model. So he actually self-selected for the countries that show him the data that he wants. And so it was basically a fraudulent study. Even him, before he died at the end of his life, he admitted that animal fats don't cause heart disease. So that was one part of the equation. The other part of the equation was also in the 1950s and 60s. There was this famous medical study called the Framingham study. Framingham is this small town in Massachusetts where the people were quite healthy and lived quite long. So medical researchers went there and kind of like started researching these people, testing them to see what their secret was. And their preliminary data from the 50s and 60s showed that people with higher cholesterol tended to have higher risk of heart disease. And so also that was heavily jumped on. And who took that message? The people who make statins or cholesterol-lowering medications. Statins are the highest selling drug class in history. It was the first drug to ever be prescribed just based on a blood test, not based on any symptoms you have or any health issues. You go to your doctor, he tests your cholesterol, and he can give you a pill. And it's so common for people in their 30s, and their 40s, and their 50s to be put on this medication for something they don't need. Later on, data from the 70s and 80s from this Framingham study, it showed actually that people with higher cholesterol actually lived longer. Lower cholesterol was associated with early death, actually. And so that scam also continues to be propagated by statin companies because there's just so much money to make from these medications.
There has been a huge campaign of fear around cholesterol. Can you tell us what is cholesterol? What is its benefit to the body? Where does it come from?
So cholesterol is a fat that has very important functions in the body. 80% of the cholesterol in the body is made in the liver. The other 20% is based on what you eat from diet. So it's so important, cholesterol, that your body will do its best to generate it because it's needed for so many important functions. So it's needed to make your hormones. Hormones are all steroid hormones are made from cholesterol. You use the cholesterol, it's modified and makes all the important hormones like estrogen, like progesterone, like testosterone. Also, your neurons, your brain is mostly cholesterol. All these neurons have cholesterol in them, surrounding them, and it allows proper brain function. So what these medications are doing, they are actually affecting your liver's ability to generate cholesterol. And because cholesterol is so important, these medications are just incredibly toxic to the body and have disastrous consequences on the body. Some of the most dangerous things they cause is dementia and memory loss, which I have seen in so many of my patients that it really hurts me seeing all these people that are poisoned by this medication. It also causes liver damage. It causes muscle aches. It causes bone loss. It can increase your risk of diabetes. And it can lower your hormones. So a lot of men have issues in the bedroom because their testosterone is low because they're on a statin. It's a disastrous medication.
They're putting men young, fairly young, 30s and 40s is not what you would consider guys who should be high risk to heart attacks, for example, right? And they're putting them on statins, and that's affecting their testosterone levels. And then there's the proponents of low-fat diets, and that's affecting women with their fertility as well, because, you know, this whole process is such a profound function within the body. It's just incredible to me that how it's been sold to us, actually. And I think back to how I was sold on it. It was actually in high school, and it was just a high school, I think it was a phys ed or biology class or something, and maybe the teacher said, oh yeah, they did a biopsy of like Olympic athletes or something, and they found that most of the medal winners had a higher concentration of like glycogen in their muscle or something like that. And I thought, well, you've sold me. That means I've got to eat more carbohydrates then, because, you know, that's what gives your body glycogen, gives your muscles glycogen. And for some reason that just sort of stayed stuck in my head all that time. And everything I saw just reinforced that. And it was not only when I started seeing the physical changes to my body, despite having a really good workout regime that had stayed consistent at that time for more than 10, almost 15 years. And the only thing that, you know, was changing was that I was becoming insulin insensitive. And I couldn't find anything that helped me pinpoint that until I saw that Tim Ferriss comment. And then I looked in, then I discovered Gary Taubes, for example, and then went down that rabbit hole, and Dr. Robert Lustig and all those other, you know, people in that area that were critiquing the high carbohydrate diets. And I was just like banging my head. It was such a light bulb moment for me, as much as when I found Bitcoin, just as, you know, life-changing. And I just, the damage that it's done to people, it just gets me so angry. You know, like I was basically eating in that way for 15, 16 years. And there are people who never get that, and they continue on into the 40s and 50s and they die early. Like for me, like I said to you, my frame is quite a skinny, slim sort of person. It's only through pushing weights that I look like I'm a bigger person than that. I don't have the capacity to absorb carbohydrates. You know, maybe when I was a kid and I was playing around for 3-4 hours a day. But as an adult, I don't have the capacity to absorb and digest that. You know, I probably would have had a heart attack by now.
A lot of the, you know, cardio junkies and the ultra marathon runners and the regular runners, they're also wrecking their metabolism because, you know, they're running on high sugar, and that is elevating their cortisol, and the running is elevating their cortisol, and that eventually leads to like heart issues, heart remodeling, and that's why a lot of them die young from heart disease.
You know, you mentioned the fact that it's not a natural thing for us to consume the oils from seeds, but if someone wants, you know, just playing devil's advocate here, like one of my favorite, probably my favorite daily ritual is to have a cup of coffee in the morning, every morning, no matter what. And so when you have a look at how coffee is extracted, it's essentially, it is the stone or the seed of a fruit, right? And they go through an entire process of doing that, but it's a much older habit or a consumer item. Do you think that in and of itself is what distinguishes it from seed oils, that they're relatively new and untested and our bodies reject it? Or like what? Why is coffee good for us and then seed oils are bad just on the basis of where it comes from? They're both kind of products of seeds essentially, right?
Yeah, I mean, the extraction process for coffee is very different than getting the fats out from, you know, soybeans, you know. Coffee beans, you're basically breaking it down, roasting them, etc. Where seed oils, you're altering the chemical structure and you're using very high heat, and that's denaturing all the compounds that are in the seed. Coffee extraction does not denature the compounds that are there.
Yeah, I guess we're just using fire.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay, fair enough. I can continue with my coffee then. Are you a proponent of coffee?
I don't like to make a big deal out of it. It's not the most damaging thing out there, in my opinion. I think if people are very dependent on it, it suggests that there are metabolic and energetic issues going on that probably need to be addressed if you're needing coffee that much. So that's one thing to point out. 1 or 2 cups is fine. On the other extreme is, so in your digestion, in your body, you have a limited amount of digestive enzymes. Your cells are able to break down compounds in order to extract the nutrients from them, and then excrete the rest. So what coffee is doing is you are using up digestive enzymes in order to break down this coffee. And, you only have a limited amount of enzymes in your body that they're not only needed for breaking down food, but they're needed for other cellular processes. So kind of like coffee is kind of like giving you, causing your metabolism to run without giving you much nutrition. That's way to think about it. So I don't think it's a big deal if you're drinking 1 or 2 cups, but if you're drinking 6 cups, then yes, it might be an issue.
What would be causing the issue primarily? Is it the fact that that's a huge amount of caffeine? So I will have, for some reason, perhaps you can enlighten me, 1 cup is enough, a double shot of espresso is enough during the summer months, but I need 2 cups in the winter. I don't know why that is. I live in London, so there's a lot less sunlight here. Maybe that's a reason. It's a lot colder, but I just feel like just to feel as good as I do in the summer with 1 cup of coffee, I need 2 in the winter.
Yeah, it's mainly, I think, the lack of sunlight, because you use the sunlight to give you cortisol and give you energy during the day. So if you're not having that, you're more dependent on coffee. The main, again, the issue was the enzymes that I spoke about. That's an issue with coffee. The other issue is, your body is giving you tiredness signals for a reason. And if you're trying to overpower these signals all the time with people that are drinking 4 or 5 cups, then you are messing with your signals. Your body is going to have to give you even more signals to signal that you need to go to bed soon. So that kind of changes how you're feeling, your alertness levels the following day, etc.
About the deleterious potential effects of coffee, is it the overconsumption of caffeine that is the primary cause of that, or is it some of the enzymatic responses that you're mentioning?
It's both. It's both. The enzymatic process is something pretty nuanced. I've read about it only a little bit. It's generally like how you think about, metabolic eating, and that again goes to, it's not about calories. It's about not over consuming food because you have a limited supply of enzymes. So that's one way of looking at it. And then there's the energetic awake and tiredness signal argument.
I don't describe myself as a coffee addict, even though quite clearly I am. Like I can't go without if I go without a cup, I will have a headache. How long does one need to abstain from coffee before those symptoms subsist?
It depends on your environment. I mean, the main thing is if you're getting, ideal nutrition, ideal sleep, ideal sun during the day, then your energy levels are not really that affected by the coffee. But the reason you need it is because of these things.
For the most part, I'm doing everything really well. And for the most part, I sleep reasonably well. But it's still, it's the coffee thing. I like the ritual of it more than anything else, to be honest. But I've come to really love the flavor and the caffeine kick as well.
There's a point where, as your doctor, I need to tell you to, do things that are healthy for you, but I also need to tell you to enjoy life a little bit. So I don't pick on that one that much. If you're telling me you're smoking cigarettes, it would have been a different thing, but, enjoy your coffee.
I don't feel a need to drop it, but I know that there is a threshold beyond which if I go over 2 cups, like 2 cups is my hard limit. And I know some people who will drink 3 or 4 almost without a problem.
Physiologically for your body, it sort of becomes that, okay, so I drink this cup, I know that this is when my body turns on. This is when my body ups my cortisol. And so that's the level you're at right now. It's kind of like the on switch for your body. It's fine. Enjoy it.
Can you just break down for us some lighting options from bad to okay to best that I could sort of go into and perhaps help our audience understand what they should be looking at? Because I can actually detect the flickering of the LED lights when I bring them as I'm bringing them down. And if you're at home, what you might want to do to observe this even better is take out your phone's camera and then hold it up to the light. This shocked me the other night. Hold it up to the light and you will see the flickering that's evident. And that's actually having also a neurological effect in addition to hormonal effect. Is that right, doctor?
Yeah, so flicker is really bad for you because so what flicker is in order for devices to save on energy, like your laptop monitor and LED bulbs in your house, what they do is that they're turning on and off in a pace that's not fast enough for your eyes to detect. So the image doesn't change, but it's actually turning on and off several times a second. And the image doesn't change in your brain, but still the way your eyes respond to it, it's still affecting your eyes. So what ends up happening is that your pupils are constricting and dilating like multiple times a second. And this on the long term is a stressor to the nervous system. It puts you in a stress state. And for a lot of people, it can increase the risk of migraines, headaches, things like that. So that's the bad thing about flicker.
Does that also contribute to like behavioral problems in kids when they're at school and that sort of thing?
When does your pupil need to constrict and relax a lot is if it's a nervous system signal that you're in a stress state. Like you need to focus in and have your pupils dilate if you're in trouble, if you're being chased by a lion, so that you see things clearly. And if you're constantly doing that, you're turning on the stress pathways in your body.
Okay, so like what kind of lighting options can we look into? Is incandescent the best, or do we need to get some kind of red lighting in addition to that? And I'm talking about just sitting in the lounge room, whether you're reading or you're watching a movie or something like that. What kind of complementary lighting in that environment would be best?
Yeah, so I mean, it's very important to consider what lighting you have in the house. Mm-hmm. Let me go back and just give a description of why this light topic is so important. So there's a very good book about this called Melanin, the Master Molecule. And what people want to understand also, and this goes back to the insulin and glucose and protein part, is your cells actually, they don't use food to generate energy. Your cells actually use light to generate energy, which was quite mind-blowing when I figured it out. But so you don't eat enough food to generate, to keep all those energy processes running in your body. What your body actually uses is the light that you're exposed to. So you're exposed to light. Melanin, a pigment molecule that you have in every cell in your body, takes this light and uses it to split water. And this split water creates a current, an electric current, that is used to generate energy throughout the cell. So definitely the type of light you're exposed to is very, very important. Okay. If you're exposed to artificial blue light alone, this doesn't feed that energy generation process as well as getting full spectrum of light. And the most complete spectrum of light that you can get is sunlight. That's why you need to be getting as much sunlight as possible. In your house, the ideal scenario for after sunset, when the sun is out, is to have zero light. That's the ideal scenario. But of course, it's not feasible in our day and time. So alternative things to do is, no LED bulbs, none at all, no fluorescent bulbs, because these are pure blue light, which your body automatically perceives as if it's the sun out, and it has detrimental effects to this melanin that we talked about. Mm-hmm. Candles are second best because, you're actually just there generating the energy from the burning of the there in your house in front of you, and it has the easiest spectrum on your eyes and on your biology. Incandescent bulbs are second best. But also, try and, even if you have some incandescent bulb, keep it as minimal as possible, just for you, see around so you're not bumping into furniture. But your environment needs to be dark in the evening.
For people like me who, my work is pretty much 24/7, and it's primarily involved with screens, basically social media. I've got the podcast. I've got all sorts of other things going on, and I'm looking at a screen constantly. Is it of any benefit to have those? They're not screen dimming, but they change the light of the screen into a more yellow hue in the evenings. Is that of any benefit, or is it just completely useless, superficial?
Definitely very helpful. So there are two softwares mainly, Flux and...
That's what I use, yeah.
Flux and Iris. Iris is a little bit more involved because it also eliminates flicker. But Flux, what it does is after sunset, it limits the amount of blue light that your screen emits. And so it becomes more red. And that's actually very helpful because the most circadian disrupting part of the spectrum is the blue light. So red light is not as intensely affecting to the circadian rhythm as blue light.
Just to be clear, we want blue light in the morning, right? That's what we want. We want to be exposed because that sets off our hormonal rhythms for the day, gets us alert, gets our day started, and we feel ready to attack the world. We're ready to go. But in the evenings, that disrupts what you should be doing hormonally, is to unwind from your day. It's setting off your cortisol levels at a time when you should be relaxing. Is that right?
100%. So the two most important hormones involved here are cortisol and melatonin. Cortisol, when you see bright blue light, it causes your cortisol to go up, which you want that in the morning. You see the sunrise, cortisol goes up, you feel energetic for the rest of the day. And then once sunset happens, your body starts to secrete melatonin to get you sleepy, and eventually you get to a level of melatonin that's high enough that you go to bed. If you're exposed to artificial light after sunset, it causes secretion of more cortisol and less melatonin. So that pumps you up, gives you energy at night, which is not what you want. And not only is that important for getting you to bed, but melatonin has very important anti-inflammatory, anti-cancer properties that you're not getting the benefit of that if your melatonin is being destroyed by artificial light at night.
Just before we move off the light topic, I wanted to raise red light therapy. First of all, do we need red light to be on as part of the lighting mix in the evenings, just in general? And second of all, targeted red light therapies. Some people use it in the morning, some people use it in the evenings. What are the benefits of that as a therapy, as a targeted, concentrated therapy? And I guess the first question that I asked as well.
Going back also, you asked me if we need blue light during the day. We definitely do, but you want it in a balanced spectrum, not isolated blue light like we get from LEDs. So the sun has blue light, but it's combined with other parts of the spectra, most importantly red and infrared light, which sort of balance the kind of excitatory part of the blue spectrum. So they come hand in hand and they balance each other out. If you're just exposed to artificial blue light alone, that has negative consequences on your body. So some ways to offset that is to be exposed to more red light during the day. And so red light therapy devices, that's what they do. There's a lot of anecdotal evidence of people saying, it's very helpful for me. Most of the data, what it shows benefit in is muscle recovery and joint pains and skin conditions. So it can be very helpful for that. You don't want to, we're always trying to mimic the natural sun signals. So you don't want to be doing this red light therapy at night because in nature, there's not that much red light therapy.
When during the day is red light at its peak then from the sun?
It's at sunrise and sunset. And
are they of equivalent? So are they the same? Is the quality of red light you receive in the morning at sunrise the same as sunset? So if you miss a morning, can you get it at night? Or is there a difference in how your body responds at different times of the day?
Your body wants that signal in the morning, very, very importantly, So that's why the sunrise is a lot is very important. I think more important than the sunset. The more sunsets you see, the better. But sunrises are the most important.
I get the sunrise directly into my living room in the mornings. How long am I supposed to be exposing myself to it? Is it simply a case of just standing at the window or the balcony for 2 minutes, 3 minutes, or is it something I need to spend half an hour in?
The longer, the better. For me personally, I've noticed that the minimum for me is 10 minutes. So I aim, when I don't have more time, I just aim for 10 minutes where I'm seeing the sun as early as possible. And I think this is the minimum, and that's a great starting point. What you also should combine with that, especially if you're inside and under artificial light a lot, is to, at several times during the day, is to take breaks and do this again. So you do it in the morning at sunrise, do another one at noon, and another one in the afternoon. And in that case, then, I mean, you're not getting a lot of the healing properties of the sunlight, but what you're at least getting is the circadian signals from the sun to your eyes. And so your body's kind of aware of the daytime and nighttime.
Let's talk about EMF. So this is something that, you know, people get really passionate about EMF. Can you explain to us what the problem is? Like, because we live in an age of electrification. It's everywhere and everything's wireless, but we don't really understand. And I certainly, of all the things that we've discussed today and we will discuss, it's probably the thing I understand least and know the least about in terms of what action I should be doing.
To understand the biology and the science of it. So if you remember what I said, your body uses light, melanin uses light to break down water into hydrogen and oxygen. That generates an electric field in the cell. So your cells are electrically charged, and the more electrically charged you are, the more energy you have, you know. If you're getting signals outside, electromagnetic frequencies, they're affecting this electric field that's in your cells. So it's affecting your ability to your cells to generate energy. Experimentally, they proved that exposing people to electromagnetic frequencies, exposing cells, causes an influx of calcium ions into the cells. So your cells have a tight balance of ions or electrolytes in and outside. There are certain proportions of how much calcium you need to have outside the cell versus inside the cell. A lot of cellular processes are dictated by this balance. EMFs, what they do is that they increase the calcium inside the cell, and that actually increases the amount of free radicals in the cell. So it's a stressor on the cell. It increases inflammation in the cell. So that's how, on a cellular level, these EMFs are affecting us.
So, Dr. Ammous, if I can just interrupt you, calcium in and of itself is not bad for you. We need that for our bones, our teeth and nails, all that sort of stuff. But there is a process that's catalyzed by EMF that not injects it, but draws it into your cell, and that's bad because it interferes with your electrical charges.
The way your cell works is your cell is kind of like your cells are similar to a battery, where you have there are balances of ions inside and outside to create ion gradients that generates, that's how cellular processes are driven. So there needs to be the natural environment is you have a lot more calcium outside than inside, and these channels allow influx of calcium when you need it. If EMFs are activating these channels, you're getting more calcium influx than you need at any point, and that drives inflammation in the cell.
Does that then lead to particular types of inflammation outside the cell as well?
Inflammation in the cell can lead to all sorts of diseases, cancer, diabetes, pain, all these things can be driven by inflammation inside the cell. And there's a lot of studies linking electromagnetic frequency exposure, whether it's from cell phone use, whether it's from radiation towers, from cell towers, to all sorts of diseases, including cancers.
So what's going on when these people release studies and they go, oh, we've done a study and, there's no direct correlation or direct cause between cell phone towers or electromagnetic fields through whatever else and any kind of disease. So, like, why isn't it showing up in studies that are being published? There was a scare a long time ago. You know, when mobile phones became popularized in Australia, there is still a university called RMIT in Melbourne. And they had these issues with a bunch of staff suddenly developing brain cancers. And then that story just sort of disappeared. I think there was later on they did an investigation. I said, oh yeah, and there's no issue. But it was like maybe 3, 4 or 5 people in that university, in that building, that campus, developed, you know, a particular type of cancer in the brain. And it's like, okay. And I didn't hear about it after that, nothing about that. But there's always been sort of in online discourse that, oh yeah, it does develop cancers, you know, cell phone towers in your buildings, be careful. But I don't know what to be careful of, and I don't know what to mitigate. Like, what is the problem with that? Is it the fact that the process that you've just described about the imbalance of calcium leading to all sorts of other issues? The fact that it may not be consistent in everybody, like the inflammation doesn't lead to the same kind of diseases in everybody. They can't pinpoint a cause to EMF exposure. Like, why isn't it not more obvious, but why isn't it more clear cut in the studies that this is in fact the problem?
Yeah, so if you think that the pharmaceutical and food industry are powerful, they're nothing compared to the tech industry. If you have data out there that's showing all these cell towers are harmful for you, that's really, really, really bad for business. There is a very, very strong campaign to kind of discredit any sort of research that looks into EMF. A very good book, if people are interested about this, it's called Going Somewhere by Andy Marino. And he's a scientific researcher who was looking into just the effects of light and electromagnetic frequencies on rats. And he published so many studies and he just faced so much suppression, him and his lab, because it's completely altering the landscape as we know it. There are just companies making trillions and trillions of dollars based on the model of it's okay to put a cell tower over a building that people are living in. The thing about it is that the way it affects our biology is different from one person to another. So there are people who are able to deal with this stressor. There are people that are generally healthier. They're able to deal with this, calcium issue that's happening. But overall, it's a bad stressor for the body. And I don't want to, just be the doom and gloom person to scare people. And, there's nothing we can do about this.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there are things we can do about it, even if you live in a city. But, some things to look out for is don't live in a building that has a cell tower on top of it. Because the way the signal works is it's most harmful the closer you are to it. So the more distance you put yourself from the signal, the better you are. So that's point number one. Point number two is turn your Wi-Fi off at night. Of course, we all need Wi-Fi. It's very hard to live without it. It would be ideal if you can use wired internet, but that's very not practical. But what you can do is just simply turn it off at night so that you're not getting exposed to these frequencies while you're sleeping. That's another thing. Number two is try and not keep your phone on your body as all the time. As dudes, we put it in our pockets a lot of times, but if you're able to, when you're sitting, just take it out. That helps. Any things that are putting distance between you and the device is helpful.
What about the biological process within the cell? Is there anything that we can consume from a food point of view? Can we drink something? Is there I don't know, what do you call those green powders that people put, spirulina and all this sort of stuff? Like, do any of these things kind of help? Like, I'm just throwing things out there. I have no knowledge of this stuff.
Very important way to protect yourself is to make sure that your cell membranes are healthy. And you do that by eating good fats, animal fats, and avoiding vegetable seed oils. Eating fish also, which is rich in DHA, is very helpful for that. Make sure that you're incorporating some fish in your diet. These are things you can do. Other things, I mean, very, very important thing that most of us don't do enough of is grounding, which is to be out in nature barefoot. What that does is that all the extra charge that your body is absorbing from these electromagnetic frequencies, from these devices, it causes you to unleash it into the ground, and you absorb negative electrons that are actually supporting for your biology.
Can we do that through our hands as well?
Correct. Yeah. If you touch trees,
I mean, to be barefoot is not practical for a lot of people, but if you're out and about on the street, and you touch a tree, is that grounding?
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
So these hippies with their tree hugging and all,
they're right.
They're onto something. Hug a tree, right?
They're on something. And of course,
I love that.
The most important thing to mitigate the effects of EMF on the body is to get as much sun as possible. If you build up the melanin in your skin, the melanin protects you against EMF.
What about having plants just for example, in my living room, to have like pot plants and things like that? Do they absorb any of the EMF, or is there any kind of benefit to that other than lifting your mood? I've
read tweets about this. I haven't really looked into it.
Yeah.
Having good energy, live energy is good also, you get good energy if you go on a hike because you're getting all this energy that the trees are emitting. So I assume that that's good for you on the house as well.
I'm just drawing a blank. What's that form of photography where they photograph trees and the trees are just emitting this brilliant white light? I'm just trying to... Is it UV photography?
Yeah.
And I just wonder, if there's any kind of benefit to having plants in your house, and do they absorb any of that sort of electromagnetism or anything like that? Or
I'm sure that helps. I mean, yeah, and there are, again, where you live is very important. Don't live by a cell tower. If you're far enough from a cell tower and you're turning off your Wi-Fi at night, and then another important one is smart meters. Smart meters emit a lot of electromagnetic frequencies, so that's something to look into as well.
Even if they're covered by they're usually in cupboards, for example. Doesn't that mitigate any of it at all?
It depends on what the cupboard is made of. If it's made of lead, then you're good.
They're usually just like chipwood or something like that.
I mean, if people really want to go down that rabbit hole, you can buy like a RF meter, a radio frequency meter, and just test your house, and close to a Wi-Fi router, it's going to be very high. If you're using your laptop, preferable not to have it plugged in, because that's also creating an electric field that's affecting you. Another very, very important one is Bluetooth headphones.
Oh, yeah, I was going to get onto that because so in the studio, we've got these wired headsets that we have. But during the day, I walk around with a wireless headset because that's just all the rage now. And the devices don't really accommodate anything that's got a plug anymore.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I do not recommend Bluetooth headphones. Not only are they emitting a high electromagnetic field that's affecting the biology, as we're saying, they're actually communicating with each other. So the electromagnetic field is actually directly going through your brain. So I really do not recommend them.
Is there something you've identified that's a specific health threat as a result of that, or is it just in general the idea of it?
No, I mean, there's a lot of people that have issues with tinnitus, with buzzing in their ears, with hearing loss, and it's a lot from these headphones. I mean, I don't know where the data is what's gonna show in 10 years because this is a new invention, but we know that electromagnetic frequencies lead to brain cancer, brain masses, brain tumors. So I'm hoping that people, are aware of that because that's a potential threat.
My God. Okay. I need to change a lot about my...
Yeah, sorry. There are good headphones on Amazon that you can find or online. They're called air tubes.
Air tubes. Okay.
Yeah. And what they are, no affiliation, but there's air in the wire that comes from your device. So you're not getting any of the electromagnetic frequencies from the device. And, they're less convenient than the wireless one, but, your health is also convenience.
Otherwise, just regular brands with their wired headsets will be fine.
They're better than wireless, yes.
Yeah.
But they're still connecting you to the electromagnetic frequencies that are coming from your cell phone.
Here I thought I was doing most things right, but now I'm a bit worried about things like your hearing and eyesight. So, for example, doing this job, with growing Bitcoin archive, for the first 2 years, I was glued to my phone, morning, noon, and night, just constantly having something so close to my face because it was just the way in which I did it. And if I wasn't on that, I was on the laptop. And I went from having perfect vision to suddenly it's a really bizarre thing where my one eye is nearsighted, one eye is long-sighted. And every now and then, just for a brief hour or two, it will correct and it will just be perfectly clear as well. So, but then it sort of goes away and something like it just disappears. And I'm like, is that something that I can actually fix? Is it just the muscles in my eyes becoming accustomed to this? Is it the blue light from the screen? Or is it just getting older and, that's just what happens to everybody? Your eyes deteriorate. And I'm like, what do I do? How do I look for solutions to this?
Your eye muscles, the focusing muscles, you have two different sorts of ways your eyes want to look at things. So there's the muscles that you use to look at close things and muscles you use to look at things in the distance. Mm-hmm. We, in our current lives, because most of what we do is on screens, we use too much of the eyes, that the muscles for close vision. We don't use enough of the distance vision. So one way to kind of help fix that is look out in the distance. Whether you're at a rooftop, look outside in the distance. Look at the sun when it's not too hot in the morning or close to sunset. That kind of relaxes the muscles that we're overusing so much by looking at screens. And a lot of people are able to recover their vision by doing that.
And is that something I should repeat like multiple times in a day, or just make sure you get like 20 or 30 minutes of that in every day? Like how
as much as possible, but also what's important is, so if you're on a laptop a lot, make sure that you take a break every once in a while, look out. That's giving your eye a break, even if you're just looking to the side. So that's one thing. The looking out in the distance, you want to be doing it every day.
And should you be looking like, when you say the distance, is it like, 40, 50, 100 meters ahead, or literally to the horizon?
The horizon.
Yeah, I definitely need to improve on some of this stuff. The quick win for me, I think, first of all, the lighting stuff that we spoke about.
Yep.
I don't really get a lot of blue light exposure from LEDs because they're really dimmed. I almost like sit in darkness. And my laptop's got that Flux app on it, which, isn't too bad. It's not great. Any kind of laptop exposure in the dark is not really that great. And I watch minimal TV, but then I'm thinking about, okay, Wi-Fi. I don't have the right sort of lights. There's still LED lights. I need to get incandescent lamps. I need to buy some plants because I just feel like, I don't know why. I don't know what the tangible thing is, but I just feel like plants in a living room make for healthier living.
100%.
Perhaps there is some kind of tangible effect of that.
Do you have blue blocking glasses?
No, I've seen your brother wear those. Yeah. I'm not sure I'm funky enough for them.
Honestly, I don't recommend people buying many things, but this is really important. I would recommend it to everyone.
And when would you recommend wearing those?
So, ideally, you don't want any blue light after sunset. So after sunset, it's a little bit difficult if you live in a higher latitude country, you start wearing them at like 4 or 5. Mm-hmm. But you want to at least have a few hours before bedtime where you did not have any blue light exposure. And so I would put them on 2 or 3 hours before bedtime. The red lensed ones.
So when I look at something, when I look to what action I'm going to take, I would usually be like, okay, which problem is it solving for me? If I don't have a problem, if I don't have any kind of symptoms, do I need to take an action to remedy something that doesn't really exist? For example, if I'm struggling with my sleep and it might be because of, the light exposure, I'd probably look to that. But if I'm not struggling with my sleep, do I need that?
Very good question. So The main reason you want to use these blue blocking glasses is to prevent the breakdown of melatonin by blue light after sunset. And melatonin is not just needed to get you to bed. It also has very important anti-inflammatory, anti-cancer, regenerative properties. So if you are getting, even if you're going to bed well, that means you have enough melatonin, but you could have a lot more melatonin if you have these blue blocking glasses. And you will have deeper sleep and more regenerative sleep.
Deeper sleep.
Correct.
And more regenerative. Okay. Yeah, that could be a win for me.
I thought it was like, one of these fixes that doesn't really do much until I tried it. And I thought that I had very good sleep. But then after I tried them, it's a completely different level.
Really?
It's like you go to bed, you are just exhausted when you go to bed. It's such an amazing feeling. Like you don't have to think about falling asleep. You're already halfway there,
So how does that affect your evening then? So like if you want to sit down and watch a movie with your partner or your kids or whatever, or you want to do something in the evening, does that diminish your ability to do that because you're basically falling asleep by 8:30 or something like that,
I mean, I think ideally people should be going to bed early. So I don't think people should be going back to bed at 11 p.m. I go to bed at 9. I think.
Oh, really?
Yes.
What time do you wake up?
Depends on I wake up before the sunrise so I can see the sunrise. So in the summer I wake up close to 5. In the winter I wake up 6:30 or something, 6:30.
So early for me is 10:30. Normal is 11.
That's pretty late.
Late is any time. Yeah, late for me is any time after 11. Like the idea of sleeping at 9, I would wake up at 11:30 again, and I'd struggle to fall back asleep. I mean, maybe it's a habit thing, right?
Maybe you're getting too much blue light after sunset, so that's why you don't get enough melatonin.
Now, Dr. Ammous, you are also a Bitcoiner.
Yes.
Right now, of course you're going to be a Bitcoiner with the most persuasive, the most legendary, I guess, the best-selling Bitcoin book of all time as well. The Bitcoin Standard is an absolute phenomenon. And so I guess you were destined to become a Bitcoiner. But is there anyone in your family who has resisted Saifedean's orange pilling yet?
There are levels of resistance. Some people are just don't think too much about it. Some people are still not strong believers. So even the best orange piller can't orange pill everyone. So if people feel a bit down because of that, don't feel down. Sometimes even Saifedean can't do it. So
what's the general consensus amongst your peers, your professional peers in the medical profession? Are they receptive to it? Or because, the perception is that most doctors make a pretty good living, that they don't need to care about too much about inflation because they're making so much money, right? And so this is also the case in many well-to-do professions. There's a kind of entrenched idea that the system is serving them well enough that they can, buy their house, no problem with their income. They can have enough money for a couple of cars, some holiday vacations, send their kids to good schools. There's a perception that doctors do well enough not to give a stuff about inflation. But when you inevitably have that discussion amongst your peers, how do they perceive this whole Bitcoin thing? Are they aware of there being a problem, an economic problem with monetary debasement?
Yeah, so believe it or not, doctors make a very good salary, but inflation is catching up for everyone, Even doctors are, they still pay a lot of taxes. They still have a lot of expenses. So even doctors are not, it's not that easy for them. Also, so many doctors are disillusioned with the system. They don't understand why the system is broken, but they understand that their job is not fulfilling them. So a lot of them are trying to retire early and stuff. So they're always looking for options to invest in things. Unfortunately, doctors are the kind that just like to follow rules. They don't like to question the status quo. So they're not the kind of people that are curious enough to look into things like Bitcoin.
I'm sure you've had the discussion, given your background in Bitcoin, and especially being Saifedean's brother as well, that when you raise the issue in a casual conversation, whether it's at a dinner party or whatever it is in social situations, Is there no interest at all because they don't recognize the same problems that we talk about constantly?
Correct. They don't know what inflation is. Life is getting more expensive because that Taylor Swift video.
Because it always has. Yeah.
Exactly. There's just there's no deep insight into these conditions, into those states, and it's a little bit frustrating for me. I remember my time in medical school and residency, because you feel very lonely being with people that just have zero insight into what's happening with the world, and when you speak out, you're just treated as if you have no idea what's happening. And I've become very good where I have a double personality, where when I'm with people like that, I just keep things very light. I talk about the sports game. I talk about kids. And I don't talk about deep topics. If people ask me, I talk about Bitcoin as like an investment strategy, and they like that because, number go up technology.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are starting to realize. I've given the book, The Bitcoin Standard, to all my friends. Some of them did actually read it and are starting to realize. And I try to slowly educate them about these things. But I don't have that much hope for my profession. Let's put it that way.
Wow. So it sounds like it's a institutionalized profession in every way.
Yep.
Not only in the way that, we started this interview by you explaining to me about the foundation of, is it the American Medical Association?
Mm-hmm.
And how they've essentially monopolized the flow of information and the approval of what is acceptable and unacceptable medical practice. And so you do sort of, it seems like the industry is self-selecting for, despite being very, very intelligent people, but people who are willing to go along and not rock the boat in order to get their accreditation, certification, and then make the living that they need to, so that they don't have to inquire and beyond that, which is interesting because, one of the best Bitcoiners in the space, Dr. Jeff Ross, and there are others as well who have gone off and done medical school and then become full-time Bitcoiners. So it's interesting that, the way you describe it is that most of your professional colleagues are literally institutionalized and have no curiosity or receptivity to information beyond that.
There was for the longest time, I really questioned, so I got those revelations about how broken medicine is, and at the same time fixed my diet. And I was telling people about this diet stuff because I just felt so much better after I stopped eating crap.
Mm-hmm.
And all I wanted to do was just tell people about it. And I would tell my doctor friends about what's happening, and none of them were even curious about what I am doing. And I did some just reflection of why might that be. And I think the answer is in order to make it as a doctor, there are just so many hurdles in order to get to the next level. Like in undergraduate studies, you need to make it to medical school. In medical school, you need to make it to residency. At every step, at every year, the process is selecting against people that are open-minded, that are exploring other options, that are entrepreneurial, looking into other careers. They just want the people that sit down and memorize things for hours. And so by the end of it, you just end up with indoctrinated people that all they want to do is just follow instructions. And that's precisely how the modern doctor is right now. There are guidelines written of how to practice medicine. These guidelines are, of course, heavily influenced by pharmaceutical companies. And all that doctors want to do is just follow the guidelines, get their salary, and go home. And that's part of the reason why our modern medical system is just so broken.
I think it's even worse than that. Fortunately, I haven't had the occasion to go to a doctor for many years, but the last time I did, the doctor Googled my symptoms. And I'm like, I've already done that. Why are you doing that? And it's probably even worse now that we've got ChatGPT, yep. Right? Like they're looking for full-on solutions. And I'm like, I've already done that. By the time I visit a doctor, I've already done my hours and hours of research of my symptoms, the possibilities. I've analyzed my diet, my behaviors. everything. I don't need a doctor in front of me while I'm sitting there Googling my symptoms and, waiting to see what authoritative source they can find to give me what's convention. I want them to sit there and use their brain to analyze what I'm telling them. That's the benefit of a doctor to me, of an education to me, is can you actually use it to solve problems? Anyone can Google. I could be a Google MD as well. Right?
Yeah, I mean, the classical medical teaching, like, again, the quacks that I follow, they tell you that the way you actually get to the root cause of the problem, the doctor is not the one to get there. You are going to get there. I'm just a reflection board that guides you the right way. And so the ideal doctor is just someone who sits there and is able to listen to you and make sense of the story as it is in your head, to kind of understand what is causing the issue that you're having and how you can fix it. And this art of medicine that humans have had for thousands of years. We've always had people that work to get people feeling healthier. That sort of thing is just completely dying now, and that personal touch is completely gone. And doctors are just simply pharmaceutical vending machines, unfortunately.
There's a Bitcoiner, his name's Jesse Myers. Have you heard of Jesse Myers? His Twitter handle is Croesus, I think Croesus BTC. He wrote an article some time ago. Now, he's got a very traditional professional background. I think he went to Yale University, maybe one of the big consulting companies, whatever. And his article is titled "Why Yuppies Don't Understand Bitcoin" or something to that effect. And is basically described exactly what you've said about your colleagues, is that they will get Bitcoin when they are told to get Bitcoin. Like, they will understand Bitcoin when they are told to understand Bitcoin. Oh. They will accept it when they are told to accept it, and they will add it to their portfolio, when it's like a 8% compounded yearly return. They're not going to touch it at 30% compounded returns because it's too far outside the mainstream still. Even though we've got BlackRock, we've got today JP Morgan is selling Bitcoin bonds to its clients. They're copying MicroStrategy now, right? So they've seen what MicroStrategy's been, or Michael Saylor's strategy, what they've been able to do in the last 12 months, absolutely phenomenal and transformational in not just Bitcoin, but I think it's going to be transformational from a banking and financial services point of view. So even though these brands are getting in, what hasn't yet happened is the army of advisors out there. they're not quite pushing it on scale yet, and when they do, that's when you'll get the people talking about Bitcoin at their golf game like they talk about real estate. Mm-hmm. And I think they'll get it when they're told to get it. And it's kind of sad because these are some of our most intelligent people in society, and we need them to be independent thinkers. Like we need them for our own health's sake. We need them to be willing to be independent thinkers, but in fact, it's just quite the opposite, and it's quite sad, actually.
Yeah, I mean, you get Bitcoin at the price you deserve, right?
I think your brother coined that phrase, didn't he? I feel like I've absorbed so much of what he said in this space because when I came into the space, obviously your brother had already been a Bitcoiner for at least 6 or 7 years before that. So I've been since 2020. When did Saifuddin get into Bitcoin?
He read about it a long time ago, and he kept reading about it for a while, and then he was still a gold bug at that time. I think it was mainly like a year before he wrote the book that he really understood Bitcoin. So that was probably 2014.
Yeah, I heard about Bitcoin in 2011, 2013. I was talking about it, but I had no inclination to buy it. And as soon as I had a look at the user interface back then, I'm like, no, I'm not doing this. It's just too much effort. And it wasn't anything back then anyway. Like, it's not what it is now, and it's not even what it was in 2017. It was just this could become something, or it could just be just funny money, people playing around online.
Yeah, I mean, you could criticize yourself for not getting back into it back then, but the risks were a lot higher back then.
It's one of the things I keep saying. I honestly am not envious of people who got in early, because it's not easy to hodl. It's not easy, and to have the conviction that early, like you had to have done something before that gave you that conviction. You either had to be interested ideologically, politically, you were either an activist or you're technologically involved. You had to have done the work before that to have just grokked Bitcoin at such an early stage about what the potential of it could be, whereas I hadn't done that, so I didn't deserve it. And even though, regrettably, I did have quite a bit of money saved up at that point, but who knows, if I bought that early, I probably would have sold. I probably would have sold early.
Or you would have been rich and it wouldn't have taken you down this journey.
Yeah, this is a journey I'm actually thoroughly enjoying.
Exactly, yeah.
Like Bitcoin's given me such an amazing opportunity to do something that I find very natural to me. And it's just the only challenge has been getting comfortable with the fact that, despite being an extrovert, I'm a very private person. And it's just you're sort of giving up some of that, because for 4 years I was anonymous. That's the only challenge, is like, okay, how much of myself do I actually put into this? And I'm slowly starting to realize just be yourself and don't worry too much about that.
Yeah.
But it's a hard thing to come to grips with. How long have you been in the public eye?
Yeah, I mean, I've kind of upped my game the last 2 years or so. While I was doing my training and stuff, I didn't want to really speak out too much about the system. So people are there are repercussions for speaking out about the system, your license on the line, all that stuff. I've now kind of created my own clinic online that I'm seeing people that way. So I am more free to say what I want.
Can you tell people how they can find you?
Yeah, so I'm at Ammous MD and also AmmousMD.com. Ammous MD is on Twitter and Instagram. I help people get healthy without pills. That's my model. People from all sorts of diseases come talk to me, tell me their condition, send me their labs, and I tell them what they need to do and follow up with them. And I think it's important for people, if all they've spoken to is a traditional doctor, to just at least get an opinion of someone who doesn't trust the mainstream that much and see what he would recommend. And I've done a lot of second opinions for people, and I think I've helped a lot of people, thankfully.
That's awesome. And also on Twitter, how can they find you on Twitter?
Ammous MD also.
Dr. Ammous, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure talking to you and going over the full range of health-related issues that are, I guess, I've spoken to Dr. Jack Kruse. Are you familiar with Dr. Kruse?
I love him.
Yeah, and he calls it decentralized medicine, and I really think it is. It's just resurfacing the way in which humanity has always discovered wisdom and knowledge, and that's through open dialogue and conversation, not through gatekeeping and control that a lot of institutions seem to be positioning themselves to do, and I think to the detriment of society as well. So it's fantastic that people like yourself and Dr. Jack Kruse are getting out there, getting the message out there, and we're able to hear different ideas, even if something doesn't work for us or we don't quite get it yet and we don't want to try it. We get a chance to hear it, and people are not banished because they have different ideas. I think you're doing, a real service to humanity by being brave enough to speak out. So thank you for that. And thanks once again for joining us. You're welcome back anytime.
Thank you, Archie. I appreciate you having me on.
Thanks, Dr. Ammous.